We all love the NBA playoffs, but unfortunately with that comes the end of a few team seasons. And there's a lot of interesting decisions to be made for a couple of teams that have already been eliminated this postseason. Let's begin with the Sacramento Kings. So first and foremost, it was a fantastic season for Sacramento, and you want to build on that momentum, right? A couple of decisions that need to be made this offseason. Primarily, Harrison Barnes is a free agent. He's really their only notable free agent. But more interestingly than that, for me, for Sacramento, is if they were to let Harrison Barnes walk, they're pretty close to having like almost max salary cap space because of some of the cheaper contracts they have on the roster. They'll be at about $107 million in payroll if they don't bring back any of their free agents, and they could easily dump, the Rashawn Holmes contract and have enough money to go out there and chase a star. Now, even with the success that Sacramento had this season, they're not going to be able to go out and get, someone like Kyrie, one that doesn't even make any sense, but two, like the star power stuff isn't quite there for them. But there are some players that I think could really raise their ceiling, and that should be the goal of the offseason for Sacramento. You've proven that it works, but you've also proven that you need a little bit more help in the postseason, especially if Sabonis isn't going to be that good in the postseason in a really tough series against Golden State. Maybe you look at playoff proven guys like Chris Middleton, who's going to be a free agent, someone that we're going to be talking about in this video later today. There's a couple of different options there, but you want to make sure that you're maintaining the identity of your team, adding depth, and raising your ceiling. They also could just re-sign Harrison Barnes. That's absolutely an option, but the flexibility there is really, really nice. If it were 100% up to me in Sacramento, I would explore the Chris Middleton option. I would explore potential sign and trades with Harrison Barnes. Barnes is very good, but obviously Keegan Murray is the guy that you want to continue to grow and develop at that spot. And I like having the veteran presence of someone like Barnes, but again, if you're looking to raise your ceiling, it would be the first time in Harrison Barnes' career that a team moved on from him in order to raise their ceiling. But really for me, for Sacramento, you want to keep the good vibes going. You want to make sure you continue to make the postseason, and you're still a very young team. Herter, Monk, Fox, Sabonis, not so much, but a lot of these guys on the roster are on the younger side. It was an unbelievable season. Keep that momentum going this offseason. You have plenty of flexibility. You have all your future picks. If you want to make a gigantic move, you can, but for the most part, just remain competent. Speaking of a younger team, the Cleveland Cavaliers have also been eliminated in the first round. They are in a very weird spot because unlike Sacramento, they've already done their all-in move. They've already traded a ton of future picks and assets for Donovan Mitchell, and to only win one game in the postseason can't have been what they were hoping for after they made the Mitchell trade. First things first, Caris LeVert's a free agent, really their only big notable free agent, and also connected to that, they need a wing. They need a legitimate, whether it be 3-and-D, someone that can score something. They need some kind of threat on the wing out there, and Caris LeVert has not been that for the entirety of the time that he's been in Cleveland, nor has Isaac Okoro, nor has Lamar Stevens, nor has Dean Wade, any of these guys. They desperately need a wing. Now, obviously, their options are a little bit limited in terms of their assets because they gave up so much in the Mitchell trade, and it's not like they have a ton of first-round picks laying around, but to me, it feels like the core four guys, Garland, Mitchell, Allen, Mobley, those are still the core guys. You desperately need a wing. You probably need some kind of bench option that can provide you a little bit of a spark as a scorer, be a little bit more of a threat offensively, give you some more lineup flexibility where you can go with, Garland, Mitchell, one other scorer, someone else, and then Mobley or Allen at the 5. They felt a little bit too rigid. It felt like this is the way that we play. We play our two bigs, we play both of our guards together, and then they switch off throughout the game. It felt like they didn't have a ton of other options, which makes sense because of how much they traded away from Mitchell. But you want to make sure you get this right, because if you can find a wing, I think they have one of the better starting lineups in the entire league. And also, you've got 2 years to figure this out. Donovan Mitchell has a player option in 3 years. You have this upcoming season and then the one following, assuming there's no weird noise before then. You have that long to figure this out because he could easily leave. He could request a trade. He made no promises to stay or commit in Cleveland. And given how unsuccessful they were in the postseason in his very first season, I'm sure he's starting to think at least a little bit about his long-term future in Cleveland. They've got all the pieces. They've got guys locked up for multiple seasons. They have the core in place, but they need to find a wing, and they need to be creative about how they use their assets because they're already an expensive team that's only going to get more expensive with a Mobley extension. And again, they have clear issues and holes on their roster with limited assets in which to do anything with. And last up is the Milwaukee Bucks. And I intentionally left more time for them than the other teams because there's so many more options and so many different things we could do here in Milwaukee. And also it's just unexpected. Like no one thought Milwaukee was going to lose in the first round. Certainly nobody thought they were going to lose in 5 in the first round. And there's going to be some significant changes. From a player standpoint, like this roster's getting old, and we kind of just ignored it because they were still really good in the regular season. And obviously Giannis is incredible, but the roster around him has some issues and is aging, and there's no upside here. There's no potential. There's no young guy that you're super interested in potentially growing and developing into the next big thing for this Bucks roster. And that's a scary place to be when you have arguably the best player in the entire league on your roster in Giannis. Okay, so let's get to the details on this a little bit. So first and foremost, Brook Lopez is a free agent this offseason. Chris Middleton more than likely will be. He is a player option that I would expect him to decline despite an up and down injury-riddled season season for him. He's going to demand a lot of money in free agency. As I mentioned in the first section, potentially a team like Sacramento, teams like that. And then Drew Holiday has a player option next offseason. So technically, with that big four of Giannis, Middleton, Holiday, and Lopez, only one of them has a contract that extends for another season, or I guess outside of Giannis, obviously. And that's a concern when it's been a successful team. But also, again, if you take out that 2021, postseason run, generally speaking, it has not been a very successful postseason roster either. Don't forget that this is not the first time that we've had, some disappointments with Milwaukee in terms of a great regular season team and not that great in the postseason. The other part of this as well is it's an incredibly expensive roster and one that's relatively limited in terms of their assets to continue to grow and improve the team, because it's some moves that they made primarily going back all the way to the Drew Holiday trade, as well as some other moves that they made on the roster. And if you are thinking that maybe Middleton's going to walk, Holiday might retire in 2 years, as he said, maybe Lopez is gone, then you're looking at like Giannis and Bobby Portis and Grayson Allen. Like Giannis by himself is probably going to get you to 50 to 55 wins. Like that's just how it works. You put a half decent team around it, put some spacing, put some shooting around it, probably going to be able to make it work. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is a dramatically different roster for Milwaukee going into next season. I think they'd like to retain Middleton, but maybe not on some massive 4 or 5 year contract, given that they're a little bit uncertain about the future of the rest of the roster, which could force him to go somewhere else. Again, always the possibility of a sign and trade situation when you're a player like Chris Middleton that might not want to go into another team's cap space because that team might not be very good. Sacramento, I think, is continually an interesting option for them, but maybe it's some different location. The thing that's difficult for Milwaukee is it's clear that they need to make some changes. It's clear that they're getting a little bit old, things are a little bit stale, and it's clear that from a roster standpoint, some adjustments need to be made, but you don't want to overreact too much. So it was a very weird first round series. Maybe it's just a coaching change that you need. Obviously, Giannis didn't play a ton in the series. You don't want to overreact to that too much when you've had some success, especially in the regular season with this group. But also, if you do decide to make a change, Middleton, Holiday potentially, how much value are you getting back for those guys? And can you create the same level of team while giving up, whether it be Middleton or Holiday, or moving on from some combination of those guys? I think that's going to be a really difficult proposition. And I don't really see how Milwaukee does it. Like, I think the roster is going to look different, but like Middleton's probably going to be back. Holiday's almost certainly going to be back. They'll probably figure out a way to keep Lopez. Like, it feels like this is a situation where they're just going to kind of put it all on the coach, bring in a new coach, and hope that they're healthier, obviously, in the postseason next year. And maybe then after that, look to really fully evaluate everything. But the thing that looms over all this is that this offseason, Giannis is able to sign another super duper max extension. And if he bypasses that deadline, doesn't commit to the team, you're right back on the clock again, which is where we were the year prior to the year that they won the title. And that's just always a concern. Like, Giannis seems to be a pretty loyal guy. It doesn't really seem like something they need to be worried too much about, but it's still, there's still a lot of pressure on you to continually build a good, a competent, a championship level roster. And you could argue that even though the circumstances of this postseason for Milwaukee were a little bit weird, maybe they weren't as much of a championship caliber roster as we thought, given their age, given some injury issues, and the fact that that roster is only, outside of Giannis, only going to get worse over the next couple of seasons. So I think it's very clear that this is going to be an incredibly interesting offseason, not just for these three teams, but for Memphis. As I talked about in an earlier video, there is a lot going on here, and I think that's going to be the theme of this offseason. Maybe not massive moves, maybe not huge stars, but a lot of teams that had high expectations for this season, maybe went all in, and it didn't work out for them, trying to constantly shuffle around their roster, and maybe some musical chairs between a couple of different contenders or semi-contenders, just in an effort to shake up and try and improve the roster.